Hello, and thank you for joining me. My name is Sarah Belval, and today I'll be walking you through a project focused on improving Algebra 1 student performance through a review of grading policies and a brief needs assessment. This project gave me the opportunity to examine how our district's policy translates to daily classroom practices and to think through how we can support both students and teachers more effectively. The goals of this presentation are to first provide a quick overview of the current grading policy for Algebra 1 in Goose Creek, and then I'll walk you through the needs assessment process, including survey design and collection, and then finally I'll present findings and share practical recommendations to support improved, student performance and some teacher clarity as well. So in Goose Creek CISD, our grading policy aims to balance mastery learning with ongoing student effort. Major grades such as common unit assessments, projects, presentations make up 60% of a student's grade. And then non-major grades like homework, classwork, and quizzes account for 40%. No no single non-major category can exceed 10%. So in theory, this ensures consistency and opportunity, but does it work that way in practice? So as I mentioned previously, those major grades are going to account for 60% of the final average. The non-major grades will make up the other 40%. Major grades can be tests, projects, other reports or assessments. And then those non-major grades are things like homework, in-class practice assignments, journaling, etc. And then of course that note that any subcategory of non-major grades cannot account for more than 10% of the final average. So while reviewing data from this past year, many students performed really well overall. But there were noticeable dips around the major assessment or major grades, specifically with assessments. So this is kind of what raised the question for me. Do students understand how their grades are calculated? And do the teachers feel supported in applying the district's policies that revolve around grading and assessments? So that kind of is what led to the development of my needs assessments for both teachers and students. So the purpose of the needs assessment was to gather insight from both students and teachers. I wanted to see if they shared similar perspectives or if there were gaps in any of their understanding or the implementation of them. So the key focus areas were grade transparency, retake policies, feedback quality, and perceptions of fairness. So identifying student and teacher perspectives, examining the gaps in policy, and then highlighting areas of concern is all of what that I looked at. So using all of those, I developed a short student survey with 5 questions. These 5 questions focused on clarity around grade calculation, test preparedness, retake awareness, usefulness and clarity of teacher feedback, and then the fairness of grading. Each question used a Likert scale to encourage student reflection without requiring long written responses. Most of them, so the scale was strongly agree, agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. And then at the end of each survey, there was, a box for additional comments, so that if there was any clarification that the student felt like they needed to give, they could give that, and we could see it and kind of consider it and figure out if they're kind of an outlier, or if this was truly a need that was kind of across the board. So after I created the student survey, I then mirrored that survey with a teacher version. And teachers were asked about their perceptions of student understanding, the consistency of their retake offerings within their own classrooms, student responses to feedback after assessments were given, and then they came back to review it, what the student response was like, and then their own support as far as district guidelines. Um, these questions were designed to kind of um, do a pulse check on the alignment between policy and practice, so that I would know how to begin to formulate a plan to improve and move forward for both students and teachers. So I would kind of have that side-by-side complementary data and see if it was consistent or if they were both on different tracks. I also used a Likert scale for teacher surveys with the same 4 options: strongly agree, agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And then I also left a comment box for teachers as well to give any additional feedback or input, or make any necessary clarifications on any of their answers. So while this was a hypothetical survey, the responses I tried to make them reflect trends that I actually have observed, especially in my days as a teacher. Many students were really unsure about how their grade was calculated, and then even fewer students knew how to request a retake, or that there could be retakes. And then some students, would express that they were too afraid to ask, or too intimidated by it, or too embarrassed. And this suggests that, our grading transparency isn't as strong as we would like it to be. Students also noted inconsistent feedback on assessments from teachers. So we know that there are lots of factors that can play into these results, but I believe the plan that I developed will cover the most pressing issues in order to address them. So on the other hand, teachers, when I went over their results, teachers expressed that they try to follow district policy, but they face many challenges, as we know, the biggest being things like time constraints, lack of training, what they feel like is very unclear district guidance, minimal support, and not all of them really felt empowered to offer consistent retake opportunities, or some felt that it was being abused by certain students and kind of overused, and wasn't really reflective of their true performance. So the inconsistency with all of that kind of reinforces student confusion, and it may reduce the trust in the process. When students can see that teachers kind of dislike or discourage retakes, that will discourage, the trust in the process, and discourage them even from asking for a retake or requesting a retake. So addressing these inconsistencies as a whole group, I think is going to be necessary to be sure that teachers are all on the same page, and that no matter which teacher is asked a question about a grading policy by any student or parent, their answers will all align, because they'll all have the same information and understanding after those trainings. So after looking at both sets of responses, both students and teachers, 3 key issues really stood out to me. So the first is that many students lack a clear understanding of how or why they are even assessed, or, these major grades count for so much. Um, the second is that practices around retakes and feedback aren't consistent across teachers, within subject areas, and definitely, cross-curricular, which could lead to confusion for our students. And then finally, there's definitely a communication gap between policy expectations, and classroom level implementation, which happens on our teachers' end, but it contributes to that student confusion. So these are really significant roadblocks to our students' success, I think. So I laid out just kind of a list of my recommendations to um, begin to work towards, um, consistency and clarity, which is to develop short student-friendly videos that explain the grading policy. If we are able to eventually develop one for each grade level or subject area, that may provide the teachers even the opportunity to, record it and essentially teach it themselves, which will reinforce within their teacher groups the policies, and their understanding of it. Um, you truly know that you know something when you're able to teach it, essentially. And then standardizing retakes and redo procedures across, first the Algebra 1 team, we would begin with this team and then continue to grow to different teams, as we see hopefully the success of the implementation of it. And then we would train teachers on giving actionable feedback tied to mastery, um, which may look like, teachers coaching one another, or it could look like a professional development session that the entire team can attend and kind of keep each other accountable for implementing and maintaining. We would build regular PLC discussions around grading trends and strategies and kind of just have those consistent check-ins. And then use those early year student surveys to identify the needs before our larger assessments, and especially state testing begins. Those would also help us develop an FAQ to address any confusion that students might have surrounding grading policies, just kind of fresh right off the bat. So with these actions, students can feel more confident in how they're assessed. Teachers can work with clearer expectations and stronger support. Over time, this builds a classroom culture of growth and fairness, and partnership between teachers and students, um, which essentially is going to lead to stronger performance all around, with all stakeholders, but especially with our students. So my next steps would include sharing these findings definitely with the math department chair, um, and kind of putting our heads together to initiate a pilot in one or two classrooms, and then gathering real-time feedback from both students and teachers. I would also recommend including this in our campus improvement plan to ensure that it receives that kind of long-term support and visibility, those check-ins, and just that accountability. We would develop an FAQ for students using those initial early year surveys and then adjust FAQs as needed after we are able to reassess and gather more updated student input as the implementation of this grows and improves. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope that this presentation, is able to spark ideas for how we can better align policy and practice in ways that truly support student learning. I welcome your feedback or questions, so please just let me know how I can help.